Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 3 weeks ago, Secretary Kennedy abruptly fired all 17 members of the ACIP, and then he appointed 8 new unvetted members, many of whom are known vaccine skeptics. And as we all know, the committee is starting today to vote on vaccine recommendations. As of last night, they're down to just 7 members. I wanted to ask you, do you agree that any new ACIP members should have to go through a thorough ethics review process before meeting?
The members of the ACIP do need to go through a thorough ethics review before they are allowed to participate in those critical meetings.
So if that ethics review process was not complete before the committee met today, do you think any vaccine recommendations from this week's meetings should be valid?
So my understanding is that to convene the ACIP meetings, there needs to be a quorum of participants in those.
No, I'm asking you about whether, you just said that they should go through the ethics vetting before meeting.
Correct.
They are meeting today without that ethics review process. Should they make recommendations today? Should they be valid?
I'm not familiar whether or not the members that are participating in the meeting this week have or have not gone through the ethics review necessary to allow them to participate in those meetings.
If it is known that they've not gone through the ethics process and they issue recommendations, would you accept them as valid?
If they have not gone through an ethics approval process, they shouldn't be participating in the meetings.
I would agree with that, and I know Chair Cassidy has expressed concerns that about that as well. These affect millions of people. And it's not just the members that I'm concerned about. Secretary Kennedy is bringing anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists from his former organization into that crucial vaccine meeting. Lynn Redwood, who's from the Children's Health Defense, is scheduled to give a presentation on thimerosal and vaccines to further RFK's debunked claims that it causes autism, and she cited a study that does not exist. And after that was pointed out, CDC uploaded a new presentation. But let me ask you, do you think it is acceptable for a known conspiracy theorist who cites made-up sources to be presenting at CDC's ACIP meeting and advising on vaccine recommendations?
So I'm not familiar with the person you've identified. The ACIP is a public meeting.
Yes.
And members of the public are in a position to be able to present what should be scientific and evidence-based information, and members of the ACIP should listen to that information and be able to evaluate the veracity of the data that is being discussed.
Well, the CDC director makes the decision on whether a vaccine should be recommended to the public and does not have to follow recommendations passed by ACIP. What will you do if the committee votes to remove vaccines from the vaccine schedule or to not approve new ones in opposition to clear established science?
So if I'm confirmed as a CDC director, I will be an active listener and will be very interested in the discussions that take place at the ACIP meetings. I will be looking at how the ACIP members are able to evaluate this complex scientific information and the statistical analysis that goes into the risk-benefit associated.
I appreciate the long answer there, but I have to say that many of us are very deeply concerned about the recommendations because they impact millions of people, as I said. But they also translate directly into which vaccines get covered by insurance and which vaccines are then accessible to patients. Secretary Kennedy has spread really blatant disinformation about vaccines and undermined the established science by pretending that families need to do their own research on vaccine safety. Secretary Kennedy recently decided to revoke COVID vaccine recommendations for children and pregnant women, meaning that their insurance may now not cover the cost of their vaccines. Do you think leaving it up to the parents or the individual, if the choice they are left with is to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get one vaccine that was previously free, is the right way to go here?
I think we need to make sure that we are providing transparent and clear, effective communications about the benefits and the risks associated with vaccines so parents can make informed decision-making for themselves, their
Well, it's
children,
hard
their
to
families.
know if it's informed if you have ACIP members who are listening to somebody who's a vaccine conspiracy theorist that has been debunked. And I just want to make this clear. When ACIP pulls its recommendation or refuses to recommend an evidence-based vaccine, a lot more kids and a lot more families will not get vaccinated. They will not be able to afford it. And that is the reality. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Representative Barra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to enter into the record a letter dated yesterday from the president of the News Guild, just asking this committee to take a look and make sure the funds that are supposed to be restored actually get restored to the grantees. Thank you. You know, here's what bothers me about this. Reforms are fine and so forth, but you know, I agree with my good friend from Texas, the Chairman Emeritus, Mr. McCall, about the importance of having tools like the Open Technology Fund that can translate, use the internet, use Instagram, et cetera, to get out there and get our message to places like China, et cetera. I agree with Chairman Smith. I mean, we've got to speak to the Chinese people about what's happening to the Uyghur population. We've got to have those tools. So eliminating those tools wholesale make us weaker as a country. That is a problem. And in fact, our Secretary of State penned an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal back in 2018 talking about how important what Radio Free Asia does is in exposing China's campaign against its Muslim minorities, the Uyghurs. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter that op-ed into the record, if I might. So here's the challenge. The ranking member raised, I think, what is a very important issue. You know, we can debate, you know, whether this, say, an independent agency come back into the State Department or not, but the wholesale way of dismantling this agency, I think the chairman asked a legitimate question. What was the strategy? What was there a methodical approach to looking at the agency? What was effective? What was not effective? What should we be doing? What should we not be doing? Ms. Lake, can you provide kind of that methodical approach in terms of how the administration, how you looked at, you know, what essentially is a dismantling of this agency?
Yeah, we actually got to work after the 14th of March, and we put people on administrative leave and assessed what the statutory minimum was.
Can you provide us documentation of that so we can do our job as oversight?
I mean, in meetings and in discussions, we talked about
what is the minutes of those meetings and, you know, the documentation of that.
It would be emails and things of the such.
That's all stuff that we can take a look at as a committee as we do oversight. Again, I'm not against modernizing the agency. I'm not against looking at things. The challenge Mr. Keating touched on, you know, we're in the middle of what is a war in the Middle East. Hopefully this ceasefire holds. Hopefully the Iranian people rise up and demand a better future. You know, I've reserved judgment on the president's actions. I do want the administration to come brief us on what they're thinking, how this is unfolding. But absolutely, right now, we need all of our tools to communicate to the Iranian people. We need to do that through the radio, through the internet, through Instagram. I'm not a big TikTok fan. Yeah, I supported the TikTok ban. But if folks are getting information on TikTok, we've got to be using that as well. I am very concerned that the personnel have been laid off, that, you know, we're working with a shoestring staff that is making us weaker and less effective at a moment of vulnerability for the Iranian regime, where this could be a time where the Iranian people choose to take a different path forward. What I would like to do, and what I'd like a commitment to do, and I'd ask the chairman for this, is there was a time on this committee where we actually did do reforms. When I was a freshman member of Congress under Chairman Ed Royce, at that time ranking member Elliot Engel, we actually did do a bipartisan reform bill that I believe passed this committee unanimously and moved forward. That's our job. Ms. Lake, you should be working with us. We should not be dismantling an agency that we've seen over history has been super effective, whether it was in World War II, combating the Nazis in the Cold War, going against the repressive Russian or Soviet Union and the Communist Party. What I think the administration's doing and how they've approached this is making us weaker. And it is not a systematic way of thinking about how you reform and modernize things. I'd love to see the records, the minutes, the emails, so we can actually do our job in oversight. And I'd love for you to work, and Mr. Chairman, for us to work together in a bipartisan way to say, okay, in the 21st century, we do need tools to combat the propaganda that our enemies are putting out there. We do need to hire the best folks. We do need to have all of that. Again, Ms. Lake, I'd love your commitment to work with this committee, work with Congress to enact those reforms and share the information and what you're thinking.
Absolutely. It would be wonderful to work with you and to effectuate the president's executive order to reduce this agency down in size so that it's lean, mean, and effective. And I think it is effective. We were able to get information out and translated into Farsi as to what was happening. We were able to get President Trump's address translated live as it was happening. You don't need a massive staff. This is the only newsroom in the world that hasn't seen cutbacks because we don't need to have massive newsrooms.
Again,
15,000
Right now, what I
people.
worry about, though, is we've let go of all this staff, and it isn't happening, and it's only happening.
We haven't let go
with
of
some
all the
people.
staff, actually.
Gentleman's time has expired.
By the way, can I just mention something? I want to show you the newsroom, one of the newsrooms over at VOA. I don't know if you can see this. Empty. It's kind of a Where's Waldo. Can you spot the one person in there?
Not from here.
One person in the newsroom. And I know you're probably saying, yeah, thanks a lot, Carrie. No, this was actually back during the Biden administration. I didn't hear any complaints coming from anybody when nobody was showing up for work at VOA. When one person was showing up in the middle of the week, one person showed up. And nobody on this committee, no Democrat said, why is there only one person in that newsroom? We need to get more people in the newsroom to get the story out. Nobody was showing up for work. And now that we are actually right-sizing an agency that has been bloated out of control and has never been right-sized, even though newsrooms all across this country.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm now going to recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, unanimous consent, just for clarification. Was that in the middle of COVID, by the way?
This was last November. So I think COVID was over.
Good question.
But the elections were, maybe it had something to do with the election.
Well, I think you'd want to be in there if there was election. This is the middle of the week in November. I've been in newsrooms, they're actually really full during an election. But I know this newsroom was ready to attack President Trump. They were doing ads for Joe Biden. They were literally running Joe Biden ads
Mr. Chairman?
and
Whose time is
attacking
this?
President Trump.
Whose time is this?
Well, Mr. Keating just wanted a moment to ask a question, so I think she's responding to that.
I think it's
You're welcome
cutting
for
into
giving
your
more
time, Mr.
You're
Chairman.
welcome for giving more time to your side. Appreciate more